Sri Akal ji. Sat
Good
Sri
morning.
Akal.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm okay. Just busy with all the work I can do.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for making time on a Sunday morning
That's okay.
to have this discussion.
I think most of our discussions today have been on a Sunday morning.
Yeah. It's difficult to find time to kind of to stretch that time on during the week, I suppose, isn't it? So, Parminder ji, the purpose of the discussion is to, see what the 17 sustainable goals mean to us and what ideas we have regarding these goals and how our Sikhi, the values that we kind of embrace from our Sikhi teachings, how do they relate to these goals? So first of all, the 17 UN sustainable goals. What do they mean to you? Like, which ones are the most important? 17 is quite a lot, isn't it?
Well, no, I to me, all of them are equally as important. If we want to live in a society which is beyond just chasing greed or looking at oneself and trying to be important or blaming others that lead to war, everything of those 17 SDGs are equally important to me. And I think as a Sikh, they're all part and parcel of what we should try to attain. If you just take one, the first one, no poverty. If you think about it, to have no poverty leads to having zero hunger, which also leads to having good health and well-being. No poverty, so they're all interconnected. We shouldn't see them in individual isolation. Say, well, quality education is more important to me. But then if you give someone a level of quality education, what does that lead to? Hopefully that leads to no poverty. Hopefully that leads to, innovation and infrastructure. They're all interconnected. And I think people shouldn't choose one over the other without seeing the impact of each one across the whole. Yeah.
I think absolutely, I totally agree with you that they are all interconnected. And I find that throughout my career in education, I focused very much on the equality and, the quality of education. Those two are the ones that I focus on the most. And I find that with, like when we go to the Gurdwara, Langar, especially when we go to the Punjab, like everyone gets fed. And so I think there's a focus on that zero hunger. There's not, even through the pandemic, the Gurdwara, they were still offering food. And so people didn't have to go hungry because there was always a Gurdwara nearby. In most places in Punjab, there would be a Gurdwara nearby where you can actually go and have at least one meal a day.
But that's us looking at outwardly. So yes, we all know Sikhs offer langar to anyone, everyone. So yes, it aligns directly to zero. But if you think about the teachings of Sikhi, align to each one of these. It's about, honest day's work, ensuring that you work with others, partnerships for the goals to get a better community, a better life. Sikhs are about equality. So, and we've stood up against many oppressor to ensure that others, not only Sikhs, but others have equality and equal rights. Nowhere in the Sikhi, does it say no one should be educated? Men, women, children, all of us should be educated. Hence, the Guru Granth Sahib was written in a language that was the language of the people. It's a level playing field. So whilst the Gurdwara presents one element and say, yeah, we're about offering langar, and that can be seen, which is brilliant. But we should also be there to offer everything else because it is within our teachings. It's whilst we look at Sikhs and we're known as being the most hardworking, affluent community across the world, when it comes to charity, unfortunately, most of our charity goes into the Gurdwara, which then leads to addressing langar, but it doesn't necessarily, how many Gurdwara, I don't know many, but how many Gurdwara do we know that teach the history of Sikhi, as well as the language, as well as then other subject matters that connect back in? We have a responsibility, and the responsibility is not just to maintain a religion or the status quo of a religion. It's how it fits in with society and how we can contribute to every one of these 17.
Yes, and I mean, for example, decent work and economic growth. I don't remember there ever being a discussion at a Gurdwara about what is decent work, what is good, sustainable economic growth. And so
or the ethics within a working practice. Unfortunately, we have a lot of incidents in Gurdwara where they fight over the golak and the committee, and it's all about money. It's all about money. We have a lot of our community pulling up outside the Gurdwara in the most flashiest of cars, showing off the wood. Nothing wrong with that. But when asked to, if they're willing to redistribute 10% of their wealth, it becomes a bit it becomes a bit difficult unless they're part of the committee. And then but I'm allegedly, but I think we can do a lot more as a community, a lot more. And if we base it on the Guru Granth Sahib and take the teachings from there, each element of these, as I said earlier, each one of these 17 is listed or is referred to, but we choose to do the handful that are more outwardly or be more recognized. And sometimes I think we do a lot of these due to our ego.
You see, because a lot of the younger generation, they might not see the value of going to a Gurdwara and having langar together, because I know a lot of people, a lot of the younger generation in my own family, they prefer to have their lunch at home. They like mahandi dal and the kheer and whatever you've seen, so they don't see it as necessarily being healthy food even. It's just a lot of sugar, and so there's not that connection of like, so when we're talking about well-being, I'm diabetic, and so when I go to the Gurdwara and I see a lot of other people saying, oh, because they don't want to be rude and say, I don't want the prasad, but it's full of sugar. And so how much are we kind of keeping in touch? Are we adapting to the current environment in terms of what we eat and how we work? And
I think on that, it depends on who manages the Gurdwara. You have a lot of young people trying to come in, but the old guard does not want to let go of their foothold. My youngest daughter is diabetic type 1. So we have to be very mindful of what she can or cannot eat. And when we go to the Gurdwara, she can risk having the dal, maybe the saag, but the rotiya have to be very limited. If not, she normally just eats before she goes. But she, like you said, growing up, my youngest used to love going to the Gurdwara, love eating the langar, but now she can't. My middle daughter, she goes to the Gurdwara every day on her way to school. It's opposite her school, and she tends to have breakfast there. Gets her prasad, comes out, and she has the moment in the morning. But you're right. There's the Gurdwara, if they give over to the younger generation and modernize and align with what is right or what is good practice. So how do you make the buildings more environmentally efficient? How do you ensure that the langar that you offer meets the dietary requirements of all, not just being vegetarian, gluten-free, diabetes, then you have also this whole element of what is that Gurdwara supposed to be supporting? it's not just about showing, not just being a space where people come and do matadik and listen to Bart and go away. It should be a place of discourse. It should be a place where, what's this? If I was to ask the question, what is the Sikhi position on climate action?
We don't know.
Exactly.
We don't know.
Because we're too busy dealing with other things. Whereas if I was to go within the Christian community, within the Islamic community, they're pushing on projects that relate to that. So Islamic Relief will talk about climate action, and then they'll refer to various texts within the Quran. The Christians will do the same. And it shouldn't be a competition. This should be a natural responsibility of all people. We have to be able to, so responsible consumption and production. We have so much langar, we have so much wastage. I without naming the good word that I've been into, you go into the back kitchens and you have fruit and veg that's been donated just sitting there, because they go, oh, it's too good to give to the sangat, or we'll save it for ourselves, or whatever the reason was, I don't know. But after a while, you have to throw that away. Sometimes the Gurdwara becomes the home of those already fed. Coming back to the langar, where we should be saying, okay, we have enough rupiah at home. We can eat at home. This is when we go to the Gurdwara to eat, it's about one, connecting with others within our community, and it's a symbolic gesture. What we should be doing is getting this food out to those people who can't feed themselves. We're going through, currently we had the pandemic. We're now going through a cost of living crisis. In this country, we have some of the highest levels of food poverty. We should be, as Gurdwara, we should be opening up our doors as a community and say, look, if you can't feed yourself, come to the Gurdwara, take away a food parcel.
Yeah. Yes, the thing is, you see that I have kind of some, there's a lack of clarity about that, because for me, langar is part and parcel of the worship. We go to the Gurdwara. We don't just go to the Gurdwara to have langar. We go to the Gurdwara to worship and to be part of the community. And so for me, it's like, that's, we have to go to the Gurdwara to have langar. Not, the langar isn't meant to be going outside, because that's similar to just, the charity kind of work, like the soup kitchens and whatever. A soup kitchen.
Why not? Why shouldn't we do that? Because the part and parcel of, if it's about learning, the reason for langar is to show equality, that we're all barabar, there's no difference, no high, no low, we're all eating from the same plate. But at the same time, if that's why I said it's symbolic. It's, and if we have too much food and we're throwing it away, why not redistribute it? If it means that, yes, we redistribute it from the Gurdwara, why not make part of the Gurdwara part of the soup kitchen, inviting people? How else will not people know about Sikhism? There's nothing wrong with that. If I think back to history, if you look at the Sikh history, Gurdwara were open places. And they invited all people, hence the four doors.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. So it's like, for me, it's about inviting people into the Gurdwara rather than sending food out of the Gurdwara.
But for me, it's both. For me, really and truly, it's both. If no one's coming in, why not take it out? Otherwise, you're creating wastage, which is a bigger sin than just everything else. If you have this fruit and veg and it's not being utilized and it's not being ate because we don't have enough sangat, or it's a well-fed sangat, whatever it is, then we need to take that food, take it all, and get it out to those who need it. You see that with Khalsa Aid. They're always out, and they've not compromised their Sikhi. They're taking what to the people that need it. That's our responsibility as Sikhs. We have to go where it is needed. We can't just sit and say they should come to the Gurdwara, or they should come wherever we are. That's just going against our teachings and our beliefs. It's back to ego again.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, because I understand that when there's a war situation, obviously, you can't expect refugees to come to the Gurdwara. You have to go to where they are
Yeah.
and support them. But I was just thinking about when I lived in Southall, that sometimes there would be people who came to the Gurdwara, and it was obvious that they were coming for a meal,
Mm,
rather than to worship, and that was absolutely fine. But
yeah.
it's in coming and sitting, you see, that's what I meant. It's like coming, the fact that they actually came in and sat with the Sangha or stood with the Sangha to have their meals and everything, that was in a way more beneficial, because it's not only food, it's kind of like that emotional energy as
So
well, isn't it?
let me ask you the question then: who is it more beneficial to?
Well, both ways, I think. I think that for me to be standing in a gurdwara, I say standing because the one that I'm thinking about, the
Yeah.
one I used to go to in South, I used to stand. You could sit
Yeah.
as well, but
That's
you could
fine.
stand on those tables.
Go.
So sometimes if there was someone standing next to me who was probably not a homeless person, but somebody very poor, I think it was beneficial for me to be eating alongside them as well, because it reminded me to be grateful for what I had. And
Hmm.
also for that person, I think the fact that they made an effort to actually come into the Gurdwara, they made an effort to wash their hands and have that langar, and to have it along with other people who were, perhaps kind of not as troubled as they were. I think emotionally that might have been a benefit rather than simply the food, the
Could
sustenance.
be an intimidation as well. If you're in a room with people who are more affluent than you, people who are a different color than you, people who are speaking a different language to you, and you're having to go through all these hurdles just to get some food in your belly, considering that you're poor, affected by food poverty, fuel poverty, whatever level of poverty you have. If I was in that situation, I'd be intimidated to come into a supposedly place of God, which is supposed to have a level of humility. And I may not even come in. Sometimes it's about going out to engage and allowing people to embrace it in their own good time. But first of all, we have a responsibility to ensure those who have less than us to have an opportunity to get to a point where they have a chance to have more. That's why you could have both. It's about having both. But we shouldn't say it's a lot less if we feed people as compared to them coming to the Gurdwara. I think it's equally as important as each other. But then again, if we're looking at the Gurdwara, then I would also look at then how do you encourage people to look at environmental issues in the Gurdwara? How do you get them to look at their responsibility to inequality, because we still have that? How do we get them to consider? A lot of Gurdwara have good health and well-being classes and places like that, but they're all geared towards the elderly because that's who's left at the Gurdwara. Those are the people, whilst you're saying it's good to get people to come to the Gurdwara and sit there and have longer to get to know what's going on, it's still people of a certain age who are in the Gurdwara. How my thing is, how do you encourage more of the next generation to come in and take on the responsibility of running Gurdwara however they see fit? If someone said, "Oh, my Gurdwara is going to run on Sikhi plus the 17 SDGs," I think that's brilliant. At least that the Gurdwara as a location is more than just a representative of a religion. It's a place of action. Our religion was built on action.
Yes,
Our
more of
religion
a
was,
lifestyle, really, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, and we've been constantly, well, not so much now, but previously used to be constantly heart of not conflict, heart of resolution where there were places of conflict. But yeah, I'd love to see the Gurdwara, with their solar panels, LED lights, water saving, all the greenery is possible. I'd like to see Gurdwara with more grass, less concrete, more greenery. I've yet to see a Gurdwara in the UK with a garden.
Mm.
Yet to see a Gurdwara with trees. We create these palatial places to take in the numbers, but unfortunately we don't do anything else. So not to put down the Gurdwara, but we have to now, if we're aligning it with 17 SDGs, I think the design of the Gurdwara would change as well.
I mean, these 17 goals, they were, like the United Nations brought representatives from different communities. So,
Yeah.
so Sikhs must have had some sort of input to it. It's just that
Who knows?
It's been very limited, because like most Sikhs wouldn't know what the sustainable issues are, apart from the broad themes. It's like, well, climate change, that's on the news a lot now, but like, how do we break it down? Like, how does the kind of work that we do, and that brings me on to this quality of education, because you see, we still think that there's better quality education here in the UK compared with, in some other countries. But the thing is, the point is that the kind of education that we are receiving, the kind of education that we're still kind of like putting out there, it's not sustainable.
How do you mean not sustainable? The type of education?
The type of education that we have, a lot of it's very focused on this kind of exponential growth. We know, like from politics as well, that we're still striving for that exponential continuous growth with very limited resources. And I know that with the circular economy, with the donut economy, there's kind of like a disruption to that notion now, kind of quite recently.
Okay. So you're talking about recycling and ensuring that we have, sustainable communities. I think this. If we go back a bit, and we're looking at a modern day society. Well, say Sikhs have been in the UK for 70 odd years, for argument's sake. When we as a community first arrived, we were probably, if you look at number 12, responsible consumption and production, we were probably very responsible, because we weren't as affluent. There was like 2 families to a household. You made things work. We were probably, educating. So I'm a child of that generation, and I'm still very frugal. And I think frugality comes along, but then once you get to a point where you have more abundance, we tend to splurge more. As per example of our weddings. But coming back to what you said earlier about how only a few things people are aware of within these 17, I think out of the 17, there's probably about 14 that align with everything that Sikhs do or should be aware of. Gender equality, that's within our Bani. Reduce inequalities, that's within our Bani. But we haven't aligned what we've taught at the Gurdwara with any of this. You say about quality education, we as a community push and strive to ensure that our children are well educated. My 3 daughters, they've all gone to grammar school, or they're going through grammar school, because that was, that's the best place to go. Because you have a good education, you can move forward, and hopefully with the good education, you can address some of these issues that you could potentially face. But sometimes we put too much emphasis on the education, when we should be putting more emphasis on the lifelong learning, which is slightly different to saying getting your O levels, your degrees, your GCSEs, whatever it is, A levels. But lifelong learning, continuing to learn, sikna, to continue to be on that path. So which does align with goal number 4.
And it's like, what do we consider to be good education? Because if we're saying like a good education is getting a qualification that enables you to get a job, which gives you enough money to buy a nice house and a nice car, and then that's it, you've got, and then you start decorating and redecorating and again and again and again, so that's a good education if that's what it's about. If it's about material prosperity, it's not sustainable. That's what I'm trying to say, is that it's a lot of our education is focused simply on productivity, whereas that kind of increased productivity, like that too much over, like a very narrow focus on productivity is not.
I think that's less to do with, I don't think that's solely to do with education. That's just, I think it's just how we as a community have become embedded in, so, you don't necessarily have to have a good education. You could be a great plumber and lots of money and do the same things. It's what we're, instead of striving to be, what difference can we make in society? We're saying, what is the best house? When do I get my BMW? When do I get my Mercedes? No, I understand all what you're saying, but at the same time, this is what I said earlier, we've stepped away from lifelong learning opportunities. We're no longer on that path of sikna. We're embracing the willingness to expand our wealth, like you said, materialistically, but not looking at how can we use our money, our opportunity to make a difference in other people's lives. I think that's what we need to go back to.
That concept of sharing, like
sharing, concept of sharing, but it's also about concept of equity. How do we make everyone come to a level and embrace the same opportunity? And it does. And I think the other thing we need to learn, I think not just we, I mean, many people, it's this element of being content and satisfied. It's about saying, how much do I need and how much can I afford to give away and share with others? I've come to many a situation. I work in the charity sector. My predominant role is development and fundraising. Whenever I've been approached by charities run by Sikhs, the question I ask the question is, how many of your members who are Sikhs have agreed to donate 10% of their earnings to this cause? There's always a silence then, because no one is. And that's the basic principle. We can't even do that. If we can't do that requirement, how can we do the rest? To give away 10% to enable, and most answers, or the other answers, we've given it to the Gurdwara. But then if that's where the 10% is going into the Gurdwara, then the Gurdwara has the responsibility to do the following and encourage people not to live such a life of abundance and waste. It comes back full circle. It's either we change, or if we don't, we get, as you said, productivity is not sustainable.
Yeah, not exponential productivity.
Yeah, no, it's going to get to a point. Sorry, go on.
No, because that's what we've been doing. We've been educating for the last, at least 100 years through the industrial age. That's how we've been educating. We've been educating with this notion of like, there's going to be exponential productivity. It's never, that cycle's never going to go down,
But I think this is why so many people have a panic when there's a cost of living crisis or a recession or a depression, and suddenly they see, we didn't. But that's what happens when you get greedy. There's a lesson to be learned, but nobody learns the lesson because, we live in a world of consumerism. We live in a world where, latest phone, biggest car, like I said, decorating, redecorating, and decorating again.
Yeah, that's right. We spend all our money, we're kind of like slaves to this continual decoration and redecoration. And
You know, sometimes you know, in your life, you know, and in your work, you must have come across, and this is where I get amazed. I come across English people in this country who live in very affluent areas, but they live such simple lives. You know, they don't try. You know, they may live in what is a house worth £1 million because that's their home and that's what they bought many years ago. But they don't have the latest car to go with it. You know, the house is simply decorated, and they just get on with their life. You know, they just see it as a base. Whereas for us, it's like you said, where's the next point? Where can we go next? How can we grow? But I think that's also come out of the fact that when we came here with nothing, many of us, and you're always striving to do better for yourself and your future generations.
yeah, but it's this consumerism that you talk about. It's this consumerism which isn't sustainable. And for me as an educator, because even when I was teaching teenagers, I don't teach teenagers now at the moment, I teach senior leaders, but when I was teaching teenagers, and we talk about sustainability, and they'd say, but miss, until I'm 30, I'm just going to focus on kind of like, you know, getting my car and my house and whatever. And then after that, you know, like when I'm in my 40s, I'll probably start thinking about charity work then. You know, that was usually like the predominant kind of response that I received.
Wow. When you say that, I wish. Well, there was an element when I was growing up. I'm just reflecting now. When I was growing up, yeah, I wanted a car, but there was something in me. So I'm what 51 now. I've probably done over 30 years within the charity sector. I started off. There's always been a pull there. You know, I think you'll find there are other people, but I think with say within our community, there's, unless you're a doctor, accountant, you know, all these teacher, whatever these things are, if you don't fall within those, you're not ostracized, but you're, oh, so what do you do again? You're pushed to one side. And I think, you know, it's only recently that I think our community is recognizing artists. Um, and I think with that change, we should hopefully see some change in this consumerism, because if you allow our next generation to pursue their own dreams, we hopefully may step away. But if we're constantly telling our next generation, doctor, lawyer, accountant, then we're stuck in that productivity again. We're stuck in that consumerism.
Well, let's talk, you know, you've mentioned doctor a few times, so let's just talk about that and relate to quality of education. So I said to you earlier that I'm diabetic, and my doctor has been, I was diagnosed with diabetes about 3 years ago, and in the first year of
type 1 or type 2?
Type 2, you know, the metformin, you know, like, so they put me on metformin, and they told me to take four a day, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. But instead of taking 4 a day, I took 1 a day. Sorry, one, like two a day. And a year later, they said, oh, you know, you need to start taking 4, you know, double the dose, because it hadn't kind of gone down. And I just got tired of it. And I thought, you know, something is like, I've been taking this metformin for 2 years, and it's obviously not curing my diabetes in any way. It's not meant to cure it, it's just meant to mask it. It's supposed to kind of like manage it, they say. And I just decided not to take the metformin at all. And a year later, my diabetes had gone down, you know, so it had gone down. And so this is what I'm talking about, quality of education, because my doctors, they haven't done the latest research. They prescribe the metformin because my brothers are diabetic as well, and they've been taking this metformin for decades. And I said to my doctor, I said, well, you know, my brothers have taken metformin for decades, and they're still taking it. And I stopped taking it, and my diabetes has gone down. You know, so because I'm doing, I know, like, you're not supposed to experiment, and you know,
don't experiment. It's your body. Do what you got to do.
And so this is what I'm saying about like quality of education. We're accepting the authority of the doctors. We're accepting that kind of unchallenged authority too often, like my parents have done. You know, they've accepted the authority of their doctors to tell them, and so for decades they've just been doing what the doctors have told them to do. Whereas for me, because I'm an educator, I'm used to challenging and questioning and saying, well, is what they're saying really? And that would be a high quality of education.
I think that's why, like I said earlier on, it's to be on a path of learning, to sikna. To learn, you have to ask questions. You can't learn without asking questions. You can't learn without investigating. Hence, I said why, if you look at goal 4, it says inclusive and equitable quality education. But the second bit, which is the bit I mentioned earlier, lifelong learning opportunity. Lifelong learning suddenly takes you away from this whole thing of going to university, having a degree. Lifelong learning is based on lived experience. Lifelong learning is what you choose to continue to do with that base and how you grow it. You could be on a lifelong learning because of a passion. You may have a passion for playing the guitar, and you will continually to practice and continue doing that, and you'll experiment as you did with yourself. But I'm just on a tangent, I'm a great believer that if your doctor ever prescribes you any medicine, be it for cholesterol, be it diabetes, unless you have type 1, which is slightly more serious, look at your diet, look at your lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Change it. What we also do, let's coming back to that consumerism, that world of quick fixes. We want the medicine and we hope that it will alleviate everything, but we don't want to do the hard work. In my household, there's 3 generations: my parents, me and my wife, my children who are almost adults now. You see a difference. So my parents probably wake up and they'll probably have 7 pills, 8 pills. My wife and I try and keep away from medicine. My wife is looking more at what she can do to change her diet. So she's taken out sugar out of her diet, refined sugar wherever she can see it, and it was hard, but she feels better for it.
Exactly what I'm saying, so that's the way I've done it.
Perfect.
If I have kind of like my that's not to say that I never eat cakes, I never eat chocolate. I do, but then I know that my sugar's going to go up if I eat chocolate.
No, you deal with it. You deal with it. You manage it. But I think I think there's a generation that has fallen into the trap to say that the doctor is a trained individual, which they are, and they know best, but they also forget that they're being encouraged by medical reps to prescribe certain things because they're part of a business.
Yes, that's right.
I can give you a personal example. Many years ago, I think in my early 20s, I got malaria when I was in India. I thought I addressed it by having the quinine when I was there, but it flared up a year later while I was in England, to the point that no one, where I was working in London, no one could recognize that I had malaria because they hadn't been trained in recognizing the symptoms. And they were treating me as if I had flu, gave me the flu jab, what have you. And when I get back to Birmingham, my own GP, who was from Pakistan, who had seen malaria, and he told my parents, he's got malaria. Take him to the doctor, take him to the hospital. And he what he had expected was the local hospital to give me a dose of quinine, which he couldn't administer because it was so much, and to keep me under observation. And I should have been out of the hospital within 2 to 3 days. Instead, I was still in the hospital for 4 weeks. The British medical system, they decided to experiment. They wanted to know what happens when someone has malaria because they've never seen it here. To the point that they want to do a biopsy. That's when my GP got involved 3-4 weeks later and said, I only sent him to get a large dose of quinine. Overnight, they administered that and I was better. I was getting to, but it was suddenly this is why I don't trust what the British medical system offers. It doesn't, it doesn't continue to recognize the needs of the third world or developing countries. Our physiologies are different. Our absorption rates are different. You know, we're constantly told, oh, you have greater chance of getting diabetes because of the way you eat, greater chance of getting cholesterol because you eat. But actually, that's down to them when they colonized India and lived there for 200 odd years and changed our diet.
Yeah.
And now we're here. You know, it's you can say it's cause and effect, but yeah, I'm with you 100%. If you can administer your own intervention, do that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like just to qualify what I'm saying, 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with pneumonia and I had to go to hospital. So yes,
Yeah.
the medicines
There are needs, yeah, no, there are.
I had antibiotics, and those antibiotics
Yeah.
in hospital, they saved my life. And that's when I was diagnosed with diabetes, which my doctor hadn't kind of diagnosed. And basically what I'm saying is that doctors know something about some things, but not about everything.
No, that's why you have specialists. So that you have a general practitioner, hence the name GP, general practitioner. But if you, I think all said and done, it depends on your relationship with your doctor. So now my doctor passed away, and his son's taken over the practice, and he knows of me. So we sometimes we talk over the phone and we administer things. This is before COVID. You know, he knows my level of health. Um, but it's but we're also living in a world where doctors are under strain, and they'll quickly say, "Here, have some medicine, get out of the office." That's it. But yeah, the other thing I was going to say was I'm just looking at somebody 17. It's reduced inequalities. You know, I think Sikhs were champions of that, and I think we need to present more of that within our community. But we don't. We're clubbed in with all other Asian men and seen as oppressors of women.
Mm.
You know, and but I think Sikhs who follow the teachings aren't, and we're champions of equality. You know, that's where I think that's another thing that, you know, there's so many things in these 17 that we should be shouting and screaming about. You know,
Yeah,
you know the farming background and the history of Punjab links originally to clean water, sanitization. You know, I'm sure Punjab was one of the, you know, had some of the cleanest and most sanitized water at one point.
yes, but now when we go to the Punjab, you know, we can't really see. I come from a village, and in my village, they've still got open sewers. You know,
Yeah,
in this
but
day.
I think this is come back to that consumerism. You know, we're investing our 10% or our charity in the wrong place. You know, it doesn't take much for us as community members or of those who from the village to go back and make those adjustments, and to encourage those that are still there to embrace those adjustments.
Well, the other thing is that, you know, in the Punjab, they keep cutting down trees,
Yeah.
and that deforestation there is going to cause droughts, and you know,
Yeah,
already.
it already is, but it comes back to consumerism, because what they're seeing is, oh, my cousin or so and so went to England. He lived in a fancy house. If I chop down this part of my property, excuse me, um, and sell off the land or build a koti here or whatever, I can make money. So they're looking at the green of the money rather than the green of the land.
Mhm.
You know, I recently went to Punjab at the beginning of this year, um, and I went to Amritsar, and that's become a UNESCO heritage site or whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
And so, but the sad thing about that is it's now created it as a tourist attraction. So tourists are just turning up randomly, taking pictures, and we fell into the trap of ego because we want to be recognized in the world, and now the whole world is trampling on Amritsar.
Mhm.
You know, the serenity is gone, the history is going. It's become a tourist attraction. Amritsar is not Taj Mahal. You
Mm.
know, But then again, we caught up as a community in consumerism, which then leads to this level of massaging the ego. You know, yeah.
And
But
earlier on, you were saying about we and who do we actually mean when we say we? When we're talking about we, are we just talking about Sikhi? Are we talking about something broader than that? Because
it all depends. At what point when I refer to we, there's two types of we. So there's we as us as a community that refers to as being Sikhs or part of the Sikh community, and then there's we as the world. It depends. When in most of this, I'm referring to the we as being we as a Sikh community. But then we have to recognize as a Sikh community that we're part and interacting with the rest of the world. We can't have isolation. I always say if you live on top of a hill and you live on your own with no neighbors, and a thunderstorm comes, you're going to get drowned, you're going to get hurt, but if you have neighbors and you're willing to interact and you give as much as you get, if not, but at least at the time of strife, you have those to stand next to you to help you through it. So the we is us as a community, but also us as part of the human race.
Yeah, because this is a very important question, because when we think about the core concept of Sikhi being oneness, and so when we're thinking about oneness, it's like the we, isn't it?
Yeah, the we. It's like SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. That's the we. That's we all have a responsibility. But sometimes I think the responsibility has to start with us who refer to as being Sikhs. How are we going to present ourselves? What is our responsibility in presenting Sikhism to the rest of the world?
Yeah, and none of this can be done at an individual level.
No, well, yes, you can, and yes, you can. I think all these 17 SDGs, you as an individual, you can embrace them as your own principles. And then you can say, look, as a Sikh, these are the 17 SDGs. According to our Bani, the following align. And I therefore, going out in my day-to-day life, will follow these. If you go through it, no poverty. So how can you as an individual contribute to no poverty? You see someone, you donate money, give some food. Zero hunger, give some food. Good health and well-being, looking after yourself first and foremost, and being a good example to others to follow. Quality education, encouraging it, as well as representing it, but to define it for yourself and for others. So you can go through each one and you can actually embrace them as an individual and then be an example for others to follow with you.
And when you talk about these different goals, it's like we can either focus on the symptoms or the causes. Like when I talked about diabetes, my doctors are obviously focusing on the symptoms, like or take metformin for the symptoms. And when we're talking about poverty, it's like, oh, let's give them some languor, and those are symptoms, but it doesn't eradicate the cause. Like why is it some people continue to be poor?
But it's like what I said earlier, these shouldn't be seen in isolation. They're all interlinked. Right at the beginning, the 17 SDGs, whilst they present them as individuals, and then people choose to go one path or not. What they should be saying is, this is what we're trying to achieve. How do we achieve this? And if you look at each one, if you live in a house or you live in a country where you have gender inequality, that's then going to lead to you suffering a level of poverty, your poor access to food, and your good health, but poor health and poor well-being, and no education. So that's suddenly, by having gender equality, you've gone to 1, 2, and 3, as well as 4 of the SDGs by addressing SDG 5. So we have to remember that these shouldn't be seen in isolation. None of them. They need to be seen as interconnected, whole. Yeah, they're parts of a whole. That's it.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. And I, being an educator, I look at reduced inequalities and quality education. And you and I both know that we as Sikhs, we're a very highly educated community because
Yeah.
we've valued education. And what you and I must have noticed over the last couple of years through all the data that we saw about the inequalities is that, like, we talk about the doctors, we talk about, they're very highly educated, but they're not in the leadership positions, so that's what I have noticed because I teach on the senior leader
Yeah.
programs, and I noticed that even that the senior leadership program, it creates inequalities because the education system is elevating, a certain part of the community over others. And it's like, I suppose it's complicated to explain how that machination occurs, but it does occur.
Yeah. It does occur, but you have to think about this. We've chose to come to this country. Okay, this is the home of our colonizers. This is the whole land of the empire. So they will always put themselves above those who they colonized. But if you go to, say, Canada, another country that was colonized, and Sikhs there have taken very prominent leadership positions. Same in America, same in Australia, not less in Australia, more in New Zealand, but, Far East. But we just so happen to have come here, and you're in a country who ruled a large majority of the world, was the last empire. They're not really going to allow us to take on more than they were willing for us to take. If you're like, if you looked at the competition between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss for Prime Minister of this country, anyone with any sense of intelligence or awareness would have known that this country would never appoint a coloured person as their Prime Minister. It just won't happen. Even though the person presenting all the best ideas, possible realistic solutions, because he's Asian, he was never going to get it. Never. This country is still defined by Middle England, who see us as those dark brown things in the corner. So, unfortunately, the British Medical Association, talking about doctors, are still defined by those people.
Yeah.
British standard, we're stuck in, hundreds of years of British standards, which the empire presented to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. And that's why a lot of Sikhs have moved to Canada, have moved to the from here, so they're they're called double migrants, aren't they? And but does that, is that what we need to do to just carry on moving? Can we kind of, be more? Can we be more influential in these sustainable goals simply by moving along, or do we need to stay posted and do something where we are?
If you're talking about these sustainable goals, it's no matter where you are, you have a responsibility to achieve each one of these, regardless of whatever your religion is. Because if you want to survive in a world which is which can benefit from ourselves as well as the society, we have a responsibility. But to move and to continually move and find a new home, it's going to be difficult. At the moment we're still visitors, and we'll remain visitors, especially with what Priti Patel has done to say that if she wants to remove your citizenship, she can. But it's always existed. It's always existed, by the way. It's nothing new. Do we go back to Punjab, all of us, in one whole soup and modernize the whole of Punjab so it is what it is? But then, or have we left it too late that that's no longer our home, and that we will constantly be migrants? But I don't think that's a problem. The world has now become a place. The world has become a home of migration. Um, no one settles anywhere for too long. My daughter, the eldest one, she was studying in Ukraine. She's now going to study in Georgia, and she's already made it clear that once she gets her degree, she'll probably work in Europe or different parts of the world rather than coming back to England, UK, because she doesn't see the opportunities here. I have cousins who've done the same. They constantly out. They don't want to stay here because I think they've seen how people value their skills and their ability elsewhere as compared to here. If you're not appreciated, why stay?
Yes. So this is where that dilemma can take place. It's like, do we think about where we're going to be valued and respected and to thrive on a personal level, or or is there a reason for staying in a place where we're not valued and respected because we can make more of a difference there in terms of making dents into that systemic injustice?
Sometimes I think you could have a big fight, you push against the tide, constantly fight, and get a bit further. But then someone has to step up behind you to continue it thereafter. We tend to push, yeah, we've done something, then stop. Then the next generation, oh, thank you very much, and then let it be. If you consider it, there's a lot of children of immigrant families, migrant families, who haven't experienced racism because of where they live and think, oh, it's okay, the UK is fine, English people are fine. Yep, they probably are. I'm not saying everyone is, but then the moment they feel some level of racism, the moment they feel then suddenly the whole world crumbles. I think it's a matter of resilience. For me to be a leader or to try to influence things within that leadership structure, it depends on where you are individually. So I work in the charity sector. I work with organizations where I can make a difference. I don't care where or who, because most of my work is involved around all these 17 SDGs. So I try to help where we can make a difference, because I have a responsibility to the world, not just our community or this country. If we don't achieve these 17 SDGs, we're not going to have a world to live in. I think that's greater than anything else. If we're going to constantly chase after leadership positions and trying to influence things, we need to then initially show that we have a strong foundation. And I think that's lacking at the moment, because if we can't, I think step one should be, how do we align what's written in the Barney to the SDGs and present that publicly? And say, actually, the Sikhs have, over many years, have been promoting these.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they may have done it or may not, but I think we as individuals, if we're going to take on a response, and then presenting that at a leadership level makes sense.
You see, I see leadership as partnerships, so there is that concept of leadership of being like, oh, you take the lead and have followers, but there's also that concept of leadership where you become more and more influential through these partnerships, where that we becomes bigger and bigger.
So it depends on the definition of leadership. Are you a leader by the fact of your position or your title, or are you a leader based on the fact of what you've been doing and people just like what you do and they want to follow that?
Well, when you have that title and you have that prestige, that gives you power, so there's that kind of leadership which is associated with power, like say Rishi Sunak, in his role he had power as the chancellor, whatever. So there's power in that leadership role, whereas somebody like myself, we can be influential through our partnerships. I don't have that the authority and the ability to make decisions, but yeah.
But I think to me, it's down to people who they. So if you've been made a leader through to a title, once the title is gone, you're no longer
absolutely
that. Okay?
Yeah, that's
whereas
right.
Whereas people who choose to follow you. You as a teacher, so you became an influencer and a sort of leader of young people.
I've never encouraged my students to follow me at all.
No, but that's yeah. So that becomes a leadership position, a position of responsibility, a position of influence. And if they choose to see you as leader, that's their choice. But you've always discouraged that.
They didn't. They never.
But if you think about it, there are places where, you know, lecturers and, you know, deans of universities have become. But I think, coming back to what you said earlier about quality of education, I think people are just striving for these titles to go up and down this ladder, and focusing on that, and taking up all their energies, when what they should be doing is to satisfy themselves and become better human beings. And naturally you will have influence, instead of saying, you know, how can I be a leader, how can I be a chief exec? You know, I sit down and I will talk to a many young person, they go, I want to become a chief exec for a company, I want to become a director. I said, why? I go, as soon as you turn 18, open a company for about £10 and title yourself chief exec. But they go, there's no money there. But then, you know, what's your aim?
Yeah.
And
my teenagers, they used to, these were 16, 17-year-olds, and I'd ask them to look in the papers and, you know, to find a job that they could apply for.
Yeah.
They would be looking for jobs that as soon as they finished studying, they'd be earning 60 grand. You see, anything less than that, they're not worth it.
Oh my word. Oh, I love young people and their aspirations. 60 grand. Oh, I wonder how many of them had a paper round before that.
That's
no. This is, you know, there's a lot here, you know, that we can unpick. You know, Sikhs were based on a foundation of peace, justice, and strong institutions. When the Gurdwara first came about, we were about life on land because we didn't kill animals for the sake of killing them. The same as fish. And I'm sure we aligned ourselves with environment and climate action. You know, I'm sure the designs of the Gurdwara and what we did at that time in the Punjab was to enable the Punjab to thrive as a piece of land. It's only now that, you know, as you said, we've been caught up with this consumerism, the anglicization of our religion. There's so many things that have happened to us. We need to go back to our roots, you know, and find them before the British had ever arrived. I'm not saying I'm blaming the British, but there's a period of change. I think, you know, we were very responsible in consumption and production. I'm sure we had in the Punjab cities that were sustainable as well as communities because of our connection to each other. Hence, when we come to this country and when we came to England, we sustained ourselves as a unit. And I think, you know, 9, you know, industry, innovation, infrastructure, you know, some of the greatest engineers, innovators, you know, are Apne Punjabi, the Sikh.
Yes.
You know,
it's just that we don't work in the Punjab, do we?
This is it. You know, we've had to leave and come out, but I'm sure there was innovation when we were all in the Punjab. You know, before we started doing this mass migration. I think we need to be. I think we need to recognize the alignment between ourselves and the SDGs and champion those. I think it'd be good to show how the Sikhs have, you know, delivered against each one of these, no matter where they're based. Because you know, we're not, you know, we could be Sikh American, Sikh Brazilian, you know, as long, you know, and you could be anywhere. You know, it's interesting that I think South America has people who play kabaddi there. So there must have been some influence from someone. There's Sikhs in Mexico, so Yeah, I think, on the back of this, one thing I would like to do, if you're up for it, is like let's find examples of where Sikhs have delivered against these SDGs.
Yes, hopefully through this conference, we will, because I'll be interviewing people from different places, and hopefully
Yeah,
we'll start to kind of like build those bridges of partnerships between ourselves as well.
yeah. No, I think because this is very important, and if we can find the examples and if we can start presenting ourselves publicly, um, and show what we have done. And no disrespect to my brother Ravi at Khalsaid, it's not all about you know zero hunger.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, Langar, we got to go beyond that. We
Yes.
got to go
That's right.
beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
but that's
absolutely
it.
agree with you. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I just think that's symptomatic. It's like we're dealing with symptoms there rather than the causes. And you
Yeah,
know,
but I think we've also been dealing with causes, but we're just not given the examples. I'm sure we're involved in, but then again, that's that. I'm a great believer that, as I said earlier, right at the beginning, that the Gurdwara, wherever Gurdwara is, has a responsibility, and every Gurdwara can actually meet and help the community around it meet these 17 SDGs. But we haven't embraced that.
yeah. And there's probably more than 17 that we need to be thinking about, So
Hmm.
this is kind of like a basic, a basic level, isn't it? But there's probably
Um,
others
I,
that could
I,
help.
I think these are the 17. I wouldn't go any more than this because I remember when they started off the SDGs. I think they started off with 21, or was it 12 or something? There was another arbitrary number,
Mhm.
and it just. But the frightening thing is, if I remember correctly, we're not reducing the SDGs; we're increasing it. So if we're increasing SDGs, it's not in a good place. We
Well,
should be
maybe
trying
we
to.
should just see the interrelationships between them. And if we
Yeah.
saw the interrelationship, it would probably just be one.
Yeah. One or two. You're looking at the top four, six once you get those. But then I can understand how everything else has been broken out separately.
Mm.
But everything's interrelated. It's like someone said, if you stop uh, if you stop production of clothes in another country, so if you suddenly say we're not going to take any clothes from Bangladesh, we're going to make everything in this country because we're not happy with the way slave labor and people are abused in Bangladesh. Suddenly, you've taken away their only earning potential.
Yeah.
Then you've dropped that country into poverty. So no, people have to remember these connections, the interconnections
Yeah.
with everything we do,
That's
and
right.
to do something here to make you feel good doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have a good impact elsewhere.
Yeah, there's all sorts of unforeseen consequences that
Yeah.
so sometimes, because I know I've heard of so many charities where people don't know the local environment and they think they're doing good. Because I remember hearing this story about they had gone and these women were walking for miles to get water, and so these British people went over and they created this kind of like a water solution for them, so they wouldn't have to walk 2 miles each way to get water. And after a few months, they stopped using it, and they inquired to see, like, why don't you use it? Because the women actually liked walking for a
Mm,
couple of miles and walking
yeah.
back, because that was their only time out of the house. That was the only
This is
time
it.
that
This is it.
they utilized. Yeah.
You have to understand. See, you can't come along and parachute in with your interventions and suddenly say you need this. Ask the question.
Mm.
You see that many a time. In the sector I work with, we see, but you have to then sit back and say, okay, what do you want? And people tend to forget to ask that question. What do you want? You know, the
And
sooner
how
we
are
start,
you going to get it? You see?
yeah,
Because I think that's
yeah,
the next thing. It's like, well, what's your strategy for getting what you want? Not like, how can I do that for you? Because that's kind of
yeah.
creating that victim mentality again, isn't
Well, I
it?
think I think it's what do you want? How do you think you can get it, and how can I help?
Mm. Yeah.
So because the solution has to be sustainable, and sustainable solutions come about from the individual who has experienced the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's it.
Okay. Great. Brilliant. Well,
Are
fascinating
you
discussion, Parminder.
no
Thank you
problem?
very much. That's been, a lot of thought for a lot of food for thought there. So
No problem.
thank you very much, and I'll see you
No
again
problem.
very
Take
soon.
it. Thank
Okay.
you. Bye now.
Bye
Bye.
bye.